welcome to the 2021 EuroISME Master's Thesis Prize Ceremony. My name is Professor Dr. Philip McCormack, and it is my privilege to be the chair of the EuroISME Master's Thesis Prize Jury, which is comprised of leading military ethicists from a wide range of countries. I would like to pay tribute to their help and expertise, without which this prize would not have the weight that it does. So I would like to publicly thank each of the jury members. Brigadier General Benoit Royal from France, Dr. Veronika Boch from Germany, Military Dean Stefan Gugarel from Austria, Senior Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Janne Alto from Finland, Dr. Asta Maskalanute from Estonia, and Professor Dr. Desiree Verre from the Netherlands. I also want to publicly thank Mrs. Ivana Gosic, who is the secretary to the jury, and she is in Serbia. I would like to especially thank Desiree for her engagement with the jury, and we wish her well in her retirement. I also want to thank our sponsors, the Institute for Religion and Peace and Spurgeon's College, along with thanking the directors of EuroISME for their continued support of this prize. We had hoped that we would be having this prize ceremony as part of a wonderful gala evening together. The global pandemic changed our plans. COVID-19, however, has not undermined the importance of this prize or its worth in the field of military ethics. Although countries around the world have implemented various measures to deal with the pandemic, many imposing restrictions on the normal routines of life, including lockdowns, the military have still had to continue with their peacekeeping or peace-enforcing duties in challenging operational conditions. The importance of ethics has not been suspended because of various national lockdowns. The existence of this prize, I sincerely hope, acts as an encouragement to students in a wide range of higher educational settings to consider doing research in an area of military ethics. I remain profoundly impressed at the quality of all the entries we receive every year, and this year was no different from previous years. The entrants were excellent, and the jury had a difficult task. Despite this, we did reach a conclusion, and it is my honour to chair this prize ceremony. It will take the form of a series of videos, each recorded separately and then woven together. I will begin by introducing Janne Alto to give the laudation for the winner of the second prize. The winner of the second prize will give their acceptance speech. They will then be asked a question on their thesis, and they will be invited to offer a reply. Stefan Gugarel will give the laudation for the winner of the first prize. As with the previous pattern, the winner will give their acceptance speech and then be asked a question on their thesis. The ceremony will draw to a close with a few concluding comments from me. So, Janne, over to you for the laudation for the winner of the second prize.
Dear colleagues and friends, my name is Janne Aalto. I'm serving in the Finnish Defence Forces. Today, it's a great honor and privilege for me, as a member of the jury, to announce the winner of the second prize in the EuroISME Master Thesis competition. The topic of the winner of the second prize deals with a subject familiar to many of us, a subject that also represents a problem: the instruction and development of the ethics education in military academies and colleges. The thesis is subtitled "A Continuous Curriculum." Note the question mark at the end. It pertinently summarizes the contents of the thesis. A continuous curriculum. Does the instruction of military ethics have a clear structure objective, and consistency, all through the educational path of the soldiers or officers. And if the curriculum is based on such continuity, does it get implemented in practice? The master thesis awarded gives a negative answer to these questions. There is no continuity, nor does it get implemented. The author of the thesis concludes that quit begins. Military ethics training and education programs for Royal Netherlands Army candidate officers during their education and career are marginally consistent and not coherent. Quit ends. So, the author also draws a clear conclusion. Quit begins. It is highly likely that every starting RANLA lieutenant is educated and thus prepared differently than his or her colleagues. Quit ends. Even if I wish that these conclusions were completely foreign to the teachers of ethics in different military academies or colleges, I'm afraid that the majority of us who have taught or who teach in such academies identify these conclusions in real, everyday life. That's the way it goes. You don't necessarily need research to come to this conclusion. So, what makes the awarded master thesis so special? Provided that the final conclusions are rather predictable. What makes it special is the method using which these results were arrived at. I would describe this method with three nouns: truthfulness, resilience, and courage. First of all, truthfulness. The theory on which the thesis is based is well constructed from the point of view of both ethics and teaching. The author has been able to combine both perspectives into a framework covering the entire work. The framework gives rise to many pertinent questions for which a solution has to be found for the purpose of developing the military ethics curriculum. What is the objective of the instruction? Which theories of ethics does the instruction rely on? Is the intention to teach the theory of ethics or applied ethics? Should the focus and the contents of the instruction be centered on peacetime conditions or a battlefield? Which are the teaching methods that should be used? The author gives answer arising from his work to all these questions he asked. Before he gives any answers or detailed recommendations, the author recommends that the consideration of the objectives of a curriculum should always be preceded by the following questions being asked. Quit begins. Is teaching how to behave as an army officer sufficient? Or does a candidate officer needs to improve its character in order to be an effective and morally right military leader? And does the answer to these questions change while climbing the ranks? guidance? These are good questions. The resilience that the author has shown derives from the fact that he has not settled for just reading plans and pedagogical descriptions. Instead, applying the embedded single case study method, he has examined the prevailing situation also by interviewing teachers of ethics courses. This has permitted him to gain very clear information about how plans and their implementation in practice come together in instructions. The author's resilient and systematic work has resulted in a versatile picture of the instruction of ethics in practice in military academies, and in an understanding of the aspects that contribute to the objectives and practices of that instruction. The picture of curricula involving the instruction of ethics and their implementation produced as an outcome of the thesis is not exactly a glossy picture. That is why I assume working on the topic has called for courage. I believe that most of us in military career in our respective armed forces know that the whole truth is not always what the organization would like to hear. Nevertheless, the major who wrote this master thesis has also clearly brought up the problems in their activities. This courage is worthy of our appreciation, and this courage is also being appreciated by the jury. Therefore, I have the pleasure of announcing that the second prize for the best master thesis goes to the Major Kevin van Loon for his thesis Military Ethics Education for Royal Netherlands Army Candidate Officers, a continuous curriculum. Congratulations, Major van Loon.
Dear audience, I'm honored to receive the second prize for my master thesis regarding military ethics education, and I'm even more honored being presented with this possibility to address you during this conference and explain the highlights of my research. First, let me introduce myself. I am Major Kevin van Loon, 36 years old and a Dutch Army infantry officer. And currently I work as an assistant professor at the Faculty of Military Sciences, which is part of the Netherlands Defense Academy. My lectures include military leadership and ethics, human resource management, and research methods. And in the past 15 years, I've had the opportunity to command a mechanized infantry platoon, be positioned as a second in command of a mechanized infantry company, and to serve as a role model and coach for Army cadets at the Academy. And last but not least, to command a motorized infantry company. And during this period, I have been deployed to Afghanistan twice. In 2010 as platoon commander for the ISAF mission in Uruzgan province, and 2017 as multinational company commander for the Resolute Support Mission for Train Advise Assist Command North. Experiencing the complex and dynamic 21st century battlefield myself convinced me of the necessity of ethics courses to foster moral competence next to leadership skills. In this presentation, I will talk about my motivation first, the why, followed by the objective, the what, and then I will explain the used research method and the developed conceptual framework, the how, to conclude with the results, conclusions, and recommendations. First, my motivation. The idea for my thesis originated during a leadership and ethics course, which was part of my master program. I studied the same case and similar content as during my educational period as cadet. I discussed this with the lecturers, which led to the question, what is the overall idea behind various ethics courses, and is it consistent and coherent? And to be clear, the debate did not focus on the necessity of ethics education itself, but on how to effectively educate ethics. And to my opinion, educating military ethics is becoming increasingly important because of 4 reasons. First of all, because of the crucial role young military leaders have due to strategic compression. Secondly, the highly stressful, complex and dangerous environment requires split-second decisions. Thirdly, because of responsibility for right decisions regarding life and death and conflicting values. And fourthly, due to increased societal demands and public scrutiny. And of course, the central theme of this year's conference adds to the importance of all 4 reasons, the influence of an urbanized battlefield and technological developments. I will now explain my research objective. Both society and the armed forces itself expect officers to be more professional. But are they trained and educated accordingly? And to address this question, I determined the following central themes: consistency and coherence. Consistency is about comparing education design and content to examine whether teaching approaches are similar and based on equal thoughts and foundations. Whereas coherence focuses on the relationship and adjustment between training and education courses. It's important to note that a variety of courses can be consciously planned and organized inconsistent, but still be coherent if it's based on an overall constructive alignment. Based on these 2 themes, I formulated the following central research question. To what extent are military ethics training and educational programs for Royal Netherlands Army officers consistent and coherent? Now I will continue with explaining the research method. The research consisted of an embedded single case study, explain and describe military ethics education for Dutch Army officers. It focused on all relevant courses during initial and career education, and it included 2 specific courses: the mandatory pre-deployment training and the strengthening moral competence course. I triangulated sources by examining authenticated interview transcripts and course documentation in order to enhance outcome validity. Having derived a theoretical research framework based on civil and military ethics education literature enabled me to code categorical, which provided me detailed answers to the research questions. This is depicted in the research model. Thorough study of civil and military literature provided the conceptual research framework, which has been applied to the various educational programs. The blue arrows resemble the presence or absence of relation, dependence, consistency, and coherence between the elements. According to me, the designed conceptual framework could be valuable for international research and military ethics education. It is fairly generic and could be applied to other armed forces and even civil emergency services and ethics education in general. It can also serve as a didactic evaluation tool. To generalize this framework, one must take the societal, cultural and religious context into account. If it would be assessed not to be applicable, then it at least inspires discussions on how to effectively teach ethics and offers guidance for developing a specific framework. Because of the attributed value of the framework, I will elaborate more on its content. I formulated the following topics as part of the research questions in my framework. Question 1. It was essential to create an overview of all ethics courses and differentiate between direct and indirect education. This topic is continuously debated in both civil and military education. Is classroom teaching necessary, or is the right atmosphere with teachers as role models sufficient to achieve the right ethical behavior? or is the combination of both? Question 2 focuses on both the aim of the different ethics courses and the underlying theories. As Jessica Wolfendale strikingly described, there are two very different aims of ethics education: enhancing individual self-knowledge and thereby creating a better human being with character development, or shaping better officers according to organizational norms and standards. And with regard to the underlying theories, which theory underpins a course? Utilitarian theory, deontological theory, or virtue-based theory, or even value-based theory? Or is the course based on a neutral stance towards all theories? Question 3 solely deals with the second most frequent discussed topic. Does the course focus on theory or appliance in practice? Is it mostly focused on laying a profound and theoretical foundation in order to create independently and critically thinking officers, which are able to categorize behavior on the one hand, or to specifically applying norms, standards and virtues to the military profession as a commander on the other hand, or a mixture of both? Question 4 deals with two fairly straightforward topics. What content and backgrounds can be discovered in various courses? And is the main focus of the course war and deployment or peacetime? Or does it divide its attention? Question 5 aims to reveal responsibility for courses and curricula. Are they officer or instructor, military chaplain or academics? And which teaching methods are used and most common? Instruction and practice, imposing norms and standards, classical teaching, case discussion, be it general cases and or personal reflective cases, simulation and role play, and self and peer reflection. It also indicated the percentage of ethics education in the various initial, career and specific educational programs. Question 6 sheds light onto the importance of two influential institutes in the Dutch Armed Forces, the Faculty of Military Sciences and the Defense Central Organization for Ethics and Integrity. And question 7, the final research question, aims to create an overview of all coordination measures and the sense of coherence by searching for reference to the topics of previous research questions, and it focuses on the existence or absence of a continuous curriculum based on course documents and subject matter experts. Now I will present my results and conclusions. And to start with the answer to the central research question, military ethics training and education programs for Royal Netherlands Army officers during their education and career are marginally consistent and not coherent. And as you can see, only content and teaching methods show large consistency. Moreover, two items are labeled coincidental variety, which means that it is inconsistent but could be useful. Those two are theory or applied ethics and deployment or peacetime focus. This conclusion is based on the following arguments. First of all, no army officer is educated in military ethics identically or even similarly, despite guiding documents. This manifests itself already during initial education and widens during career and specific education. And therefore, commanders cannot be guaranteed and do not know what ethical foundation its new officers have. This problematic difference is already visible when lieutenants leave the academy for their first position. Secondly, the process of analysis put the following problem forward: how to deal with valuable and necessary variety, which technically could be labeled as inconsistency. Inconsistency has a negative connotation, but if part of a coherent education program, it can be valuable indeed. That's why I use the terms deliberate variety and coincidental variety. Still, even when coincidental, it could be worthwhile, so marginal consistency does not necessarily mean inadequate. That depends on the overall coherence of the educational programs. Thirdly, indirect education is not consciously organized and laid down in character-building documents, and therefore never in the same form, context and frequency. And fourthly, not well-adjusted course aims, and more importantly, internal mixed course aims, send contradictory messages to its students. And this can lead to unethical behavior with large consequences. If an officer did not grasp what society and MOD expects from them, he or she can become indecisive or makes wrong choices. This research showed a correlation between course responsibility and aim. Military instructors seem to have functional aims, and academic teachers more aspirational aims. And fifthly, officers have an important role in recognizing and preventing moral disengagement. More importantly, they can also be the catalysts, even unknowingly by condoning, joining, or stimulating excessive behavior. That seems the reason why moral disengagement is the most reoccurring theme overall. Sixthly, inconsistency also stems from individual behavior of instructors and teachers. Multiple times respondents refer to depends on the instructor or teacher, mentioning the level of knowledge, experience and affinity which could lead to ineffective transfer of knowledge or deviation from course guides, methods or exemplary cases. And lastly, the lack of a shared vision on course aims and consequently derived course design, next to the absence of central direction, increases inconsistency and coincidental variety, but above all it restrains coherent adjustment between courses. The presence of a well thought out continuous ethics curriculum would help gain coherence and thereby possibly consistency. Coherence should be the starting point to rethink and redesign ethics education based on input of all stakeholders in order to effectively train and maintain morally right leaders. Based on my conclusion, I propose the following recommendations. Firstly, design a coherent continuous military ethics curriculum, starting with clear aims based on the officer qualification profile and accepted by all relevant institutes. Using the proposed research framework in this process could be valuable. I have determined 8 prerequisites or opportunities to seize for such a curriculum. If you would like to know more, please read the full text online. Secondly, structural improve the strengthening moral competence course in policy, frequency, capacity, and funding. This research reveals incremental positive effects of the course, however, it did not reach its full potential yet. And moreover, the design of this course could be of use while rethinking the continuous construct of ethics courses. Thirdly, conduct further research about indirect ethics and make it explicit. If a coherent continuous curriculum is implemented and indirect education is not adjusted, including teachers as role models, then it could still be counterproductive. Fourthly, research the value of using moral judgment tests. Structurally applying moral judgment tests during initial, career and specific education could have positive effects and could serve as a didactic guide for teachers. It could also possibly serve as an evaluation tool by comparing test results before and after a course. And fifthly, implement simulation and discussion in military exercises. It seems relatively easy to enhance learning effects by implementing simulation and discussion in already planned exercises, adjusted to relevant ethical topics at that point of training and education. And lastly, the idea of value-based ethics described by Robinson in 2008 as an underlying theory should be discussed. It is arguable that the point of view of many teachers resembles the core idea of this newly formulated ethics theory. Soldiers as agents of social justice, defending their democratic values. I hope you enjoyed my contribution to the debate on the right way of teaching military ethics.
Kevin, you have written a thesis in which you develop a conceptual framework with which one can analyse the ethics education offered to members of the military. You have been inspired in part by Professor Wolfendale, who offers two differing aims of ethics education, the one being the functional aim, the other being the aspirational. You quote Professor Wolfendale approvingly on page 18, when you write that without a clear analysis of these aims, ethics education is, to quote, likely to continue to be a mixture of approaches and styles lacking internal consistency and coherent theoretical underpinnings, end quote. The relevance of your conceptual framework transcends well beyond your case study of the Royal Netherlands Army, something which you imply yourself. I asked you, therefore, to dwell upon the question whether it is likely, in your estimation, that the conceptual framework which you offer may be pertinent to other countries and institutions which deal with the teaching of military ethics and the law of armed conflict. With this international perspective in mind, I note that you did not consult the Geneva Conventions of 1949, the additional protocols of 1977, for had you done so, you would have noticed that the Articles 47, 48, 127 and 144 of the four Geneva Conventions and Article 83 of Additional Protocol 1 from 1977 refer to the teaching of the provisions thereof. In its official commentary of Article 83, the ICRC refers almost by coincidence to an educational dilemma which come close to Professor Wolfendale's distinction between aspirational and functional. I say almost by coincidence because the ICRC's reference is born out of a difference in the translation of the English and French versions of Article 83. In the English version of Article 83, it reads, and I quote, "The high contracting parties undertake in times of peace, as in times of armed conflict, to disseminate the conventions." In the French version, the verb diffuser is used, which has a ring to it of imparting technical, practical knowledge. The English version, however, uses the verb to disseminate, which according to the ICRC, quote, evokes the idea of sowing seeds, and not only the role of spreading information evoked by French diffusion, end quote. It is possible to interpret the ICRC's observation that it would appear that the sowing of seeds would be akin to the aspirational aim of education, whereas diffuser would be closer to the perspective which Professor Wolfendale calls functional. In short, are you of the opinion that the conceptual framework which you have developed is pertinent to the work of the ICRC and to the educational activities of many militaries around the world? And if so, to what extent? Moreover, is this distinction between the aspirational and the functional perhaps overemphasized, therefore creating a false dichotomy? Is it possible in a properly designed teaching program to do both, namely to offer the opportunity to officers to develop an intentional or internal motivation to respect the principles of international humanitarian law through an aspirational perspective, while also offering officers practical knowledge and understanding through a functional perspective in combination with external discipline?
To answer the question regarding a possible false dichotomy in the educational aims, functional or aspirational, this is my answer. It's not a false dichotomy from a didactical perspective. It confronts educational developers with a core question. What do you want to achieve with your course? To achieve both aims in one course would seem very difficult because they both require different underlying theories, teaching methods, cases and guidance. Let me illustrate this with an example. With regard to organizational norms, teaching ethics from a functional point of view means The teacher explains the student the right way to behave in a certain moral dilemma. The organizational norms need to be internalized. The student's attitude will be that of asking for the right way, deontological or utilitarian. Whereas from an aspirational point of view, the teacher asks the students to reflect upon their own development and stimulates personal growth. Decisions regarding moral dilemmas need to be taken based on their own moral development. This asks for a more proactive and self-reflecting attitude, which corresponds with virtue-based ethics. So, according to me, it could be even counterproductive having not adjusted course aims and design. Even when it's well thought out, it could result in students which become insecure regarding what society and the MOD expects of them. Or students experience struggles between their personal values and those of the organization. Certainly during initial education, it seems wise to teach applied ethics with a functional aim. Later on, during an academic course or career courses, it could be of value indeed to focus on aspirational aims and discuss functional aims from another angle.
Distinguished guests, venerated Board of Directors, awarded winner of the first prize of this year's Military Ethical Thesis. The honor of announcing this year's first prize is combined with great thankfulness to the author of the thesis, "What should informed consent in the military look like in relation to pharmacological enhancements?" Congratulations goes to Surgeon Commander Richard Heames, who wrote this thesis at King's College London under the supervision of Professor David Wetham. The thesis not only exceeds in style and clearness, it also combines a broader view, not only coming from a military technical perspective, but also including the medical point of view. The comparison between civil and military standards opens a broad field, which could be worked on for other sciences as well. To go into the theme of the thesis, I want to quote Heames. "Ethical issues arising from human enhancement include autonomy, safety, and dignity. The first two are the cornerstones of the ethics surrounding informed consent, which emanated from the necessity to protect human subjects against the risks of research. Informed consent is now the standard currency for ethical medical practice, based on autonomy and the maintenance of health and well-being." End of quotation. The main subject is to clearly define the principle of informed consent concerning pharmacological enhancements and/or treatments. Not only medical standards are to be concerned, but also the difficult situation of medical personnel integrated into military structures, obliged to both military and medical scales. I quote, "All militaries strive to have a performance edge to increase the chance of mission success, whether it is via technologically, training or doctrine, or a cognitive advantage is no different. This has become even more important since the United Kingdom military has reduced the number of serving personnel over the last decade, yet maintained similar outputs. Although modern warfare platforms need fewer operators and maintainers, the resulting effect remains an overburdened and stressed system. The impact is greater with reduced personnel resilience, as highlighted by the media pointing out that 1 in 13 troops are prescribed antidepressants for mental health since 2018. with increased suicide rate. Sleep deprivation is also a problem for troops, whether operational or not, and reduces their cognitive functioning, exacerbated by caffeine and alcohol consumption. End of quotation. The main goal of military success, which includes the willingness to consciously risk one's life for the purpose of rescuing others, defense, or whatever military needs are named, is often considered the central measurement of all decisions, equally made by soldiers and commanding officers. The use of pharmacological substances, either ordered by the superior or taken from one's own decision. Another ethical aspect is the use of civil forbidden drugs or components. I quote, "If pharmacological enhancements are illegal in civilian life or banned by the military, then they cannot be self-prescribed, and if legally allowed, there must be a policy to support their use. Banning PCEs for limiting their access could result in an expanding black market of supply, leading to a reduction in safety." End of quotation. Everybody who once attended a mission abroad, I did several times, will know that it is quite impossible to limit the purchase of products banned in one country, allowed in another, that is taking part in the same mission. Also, the access to illegal drugs in destabilized regions is much easier than in the countries where European soldiers come from. But Teams not only speculates on the personal issue of taking pharmacological active substances on the lowest level of single soldiers. Proved by historical expertise, he can clearly show that the use of dangerous substances was considered necessary in several countries and missions. I quote, "The US military have no right to refuse medical treatment that makes them fit for combat or returns them active duty. Therefore, was the dexedrine used as a treatment, or was it required to make them fit for combat? US Army regulations state that an Army member on active duty or active duty for training will usually be required to submit to medical care considered necessary to preserve his life, alleviate undue suffering, or protect or maintain the health of others." I come to my conclusion. The main question, how you can combine medical and military standards, is brought to a clear goal by Richard Teams. Difficulty remains in the area of unintended consequences of PCEs, which may remain unknown for many years, and to decide that the risks are deemed essential for mission success and outweigh the benefits. As a conclusion, in behalf of the jury of the EuroISME Annual Military Ethical Prize, I can only congratulate the winner, Sergeant Commander Heens, to his excellent work, and hope that decision makers, not only in the United Kingdom, but all over Europe, consider his sharp and human dignity-orientated conclusions. Congratulations from Austria.
As a clinical anaesthetist, I've been fascinated by informed consent for general anaesthesia throughout my career, which made it a natural progression in wanting to understand the ethics of informed consent for military personnel taking pharmacological enhancements, and why civilian guidelines of informed consent may not be applicable to soldiers. My thesis examined informed consent as a process, detailing how informed and how consensual it is when both researching and prescribing enhancing drugs to soldiers. This culminated in a proposed mechanism of how effective informed consent could occur for military personnel using best practice communication strategies. I will use the term soldiers to cover members of all three armed services. In conflict, soldiers need to overcome fear, make smart and rapid decisions in stressful environments, and respond to those basic needs of hunger, thirst and fatigue, and enhancing drugs are already available that may have an impact in these areas. The ethics centred around enhancing drugs are autonomy, safety and dignity, and the military have to balance individual protection over individual autonomy. And if an individual has autonomy, informed consent must be gained. But to what extent is it informed, and how consensual is it? I took the definition of pharmacological enhancement as an intervention to improve human form beyond that required to sustain or restore health. An example of this is the drug erythropoietin, which is used to treat anemia, thus restoring health. And compare that to the same drug being used by Lance Armstrong in the Tour de France to enhance his physical capability and ultimate victory. I allowed a further boundary of focusing on prescription-only medicines which have to be prescribed by a licensed doctor. And the types of enhancing drugs I'm talking about are those which enhance cognition, such as amphetamines or modafinil, and those which enhance physical attributes, such as anabolic steroids or erythropoietin. And these enhancing drugs are available now and being used by both state and non-state actors, with examples of the latter being ISIS, Al-Qaeda, who use them for reward, recruitment and to instill courage. And this means that militaries need to understand and establish policies around their use now, taking note of the many concerns, such as soldiers might take them because they are given direct orders. Soldiers might be susceptible to peer pressure or social media. The drugs have side effects and varying safety profiles. And the UK, like other nations, has had a history of experimenting on their military without consent. If the military decided to use pharmacological enhancements, there is internationally accepted guidance out there from the Nuremberg Code, established after the Second World War, whose first principle is gaining voluntary informed consent. In 1964, the Declaration of Helsinki created the ethical principles for conducting research on humans, stating any study's risks must not outweigh the benefits and be approved by a research ethics committee. And in 1979, the Belmont Report was produced with 3 principles: respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. Legal challenges surrounding healthcare consent evolved in the 50s and 60s and resulted in a physician's failure to undertake informed consent being considered as negligence. And by the turn of the century, informed consent had gained increased importance and was defined by Jessica Berg in that it was something that involved both doctors and patients, with patients having informed consent as a right and doctors having it as a duty, with a mutual relationship based on trust. And for this informed consent to be considered valid, the patient must be mentally competent, understand the risks and benefits, have the ability to withdraw consent at any time, and not be under duress. The ability of any individual to understand will require a variable amount of information and time, implying that the process of informed consent should be tailored to the individual. Now, a decade ago, the United States Department of Defense obtained a waiver on consent for a drug pyridostigmine during Op. Desert Storm, citing it was impossible to obtain informed consent from over 500,000 troops, and some might refuse, placing them in danger. It sets a dangerous precedent to get waivers, and in a more recent example of enforced drug use was that of US pilots taking the amphetamine dexedrine for a prolonged training mission, and they mistook live gunfire for enemy activity on the return journey and killed 4 Canadians by accident. The legal defence in this case hinged around the fact that the pilots were coerced into taking dexedrine, which impaired their cognitive performance. Charges were dropped and no blame was attributed to the drug, but it highlighted the lack of informed consent. Due to past violation of the rights and ethics of soldiers and the danger of gaining legal waivers to avoid informed consent, Maxwell Mellman adapted the Belmont principles to be military specific. So the 3 principles became proportionality, is the risk proportional to the military advantage gained? Paternalisms, as soldiers have reduced autonomy, the commander must ensure biomedical risks are proportionate and maintain privacy, dignity and confidentiality. And lastly, fairness. Commanders imposing a biomedical risk on individuals must ensure it is done in a non-discriminatory manner and not used as a punishment. When new recruits join the military, they forfeit a degree of autonomy and understand they may be ordered into a life-threatening situation. The new recruit implicitly consents to a range of activities to achieve legitimate military ends on the understanding and trust that the military will minimise the risks as part of its duty of care. Therefore, pharmacological enhancement use could be valid under this implied consent. Service life which might need future consent could be incorporated into a broader consent that is more generalised and less specific, outlining themes of what soldiers might have to agree to in the future. This consent could be started at recruitment, renewed annually, or when some new scientific development or understanding occurred. The benefit of an annual broad consent is that repetition and building of information gains greater understanding. Where research is concerned, to protect UK troops from exploitation, the MOD have their own Research Ethics Committee composed of experts and independents. The independence role is vital as an advocate outside of military influence to protect the safety of those participating in research. And this is aligned with the Declaration of Helsinki and Mellman's adapted Belmont principles. The individual must have reasonable time to decide whether to be involved, and this should not be on the same day as receiving the information. It's known that trial subjects do not always understand all the information given, or actually what was even being tested. And worryingly, 96% consented in a study by Una Corrigan did so for financial reward or just to please their doctor. Now, her conclusion was that informed consent process in isolation resulted in an empty ethics, where the principles of informed consent did not take account of the social context. To ensure a soldier is truly informed, the desired benefits, unwanted effects and risks must be known and articulated to the soldier in a way that can be understood. Ideally, they should be quantitative where possible, and the military should provide clarity on who decides if a risk-benefit ratio is too high. It is known that increased likelihood of side effects decreases the willingness to use pharmacological enhancements, and there could be limited confidence on whether a soldier fundamentally understands what they're consenting to, after a recent media report stated that 40% of UK Army recruits had a literacy level of an 11-year-old. Doctors, as the prescribers, undertake informed consent primarily with a view to avoid legal liability for alleged non-disclosure. Doctors are also uncomfortable to admit ignorance over benefits and risks, alternatives to treatment, and presenting that information in an easily digestible format for patients, and this suggests a suboptimal level of informed consent. Allowing soldiers to refuse enhancements might have an impact on their military career in terms of fitness for deployment or promotion, and refusal on the battlefield itself could affect the safety of others. Now, to deliver military informed consent requires effective communication, presenting the information in such a way that it is understood, allowing the individual to make a judgment on the risk and be actively supported by the informer. The key is establishing trust, and it is fortunate that doctors are amongst the most trusted by the public. Dressing more informally has been found to enhance communication, and it's also crucial to avoid overloading information. It is also important to recognise that as an individual matures from new recruit to trained soldier, they gain life and military experience, which changes their understanding and attitude to risk. Pulling this together, a model to deliver informed consent in the military might include broad consent on recruitment, repeated at promotion and career extension, and this allows repetition, updates, and the ability for the maturing soldier to alter their acceptance of risk. Full informed consent that is signed could be gained on joining a unit that might use enhancements for their missions, and during the pre-deployment training. However, once on operations, for the safety of the team and mission success, all individuals should take the enhancing drugs and be compelled to do so if they refused. So in conclusion, the capability for human pharmacological enhancement is here, and the UK will have to consider their use, whether it is to invest in that technology or whether to match opponents in a conflict. Either way, it seems sensible to strive for an unequivocal policy based around traditional ethics where medical care of the individual takes primacy. Enhancing drugs that increase a soldier's ability above the normal range should not be considered a medical treatment, but just a group of drugs only available by prescription from a licensed doctor. Use of pharmacological enhancements in the military will require an informed consent process to protect the individual, who, unlike their civilian counterparts, has given up part of their autonomy on joining the military, and who is vulnerable to peer pressure, unintended and intended coercion by those in command. The military has failed with informed consent in the past and exploited soldiers, causing actual and potential harm. And this means a revised informed consent process is required. Consent can only be considered informed once there is sufficient understanding of the risks and benefits, which are communicated in a manner commensurate with the recipient's intellectual capacity that ensures understanding. Much of this knowledge will come from new studies, and as the likely research population would also be military, enhanced informed consent as described by the Belmont report should be followed to protect the rights of personnel. Where knowledge is lacking, doctors must maintain trust by being honest and admitting any gaps or limitations. To ensure the use of enhancing drugs remains consensual, opting out must be allowed without the threat of discipline or an impact on career progression. And even if previously consented, refusal to take enhancements at any stage prior to a deployment should be accepted without prejudice. However, once the mission has started, enhancing drugs could be ordered with the justification for non-consensual use being in the interest of the unit, mission or state, and overriding that of the individual. The informed consent process for military pharmacological enhancement use should be underpinned by policy and an accepted mindset that it's an ongoing process and not a one-off event. The process should commence with broad consent on first joining the armed services, which is reiterated periodically. The broad consent should be augmented by full informed consent when joining a unit whose likely missions require pharmacological enhancements. Informed consent should require a signature, and the delivery of the information should be via a doctor who has been trained in communicating risk and in an environment designed to minimise any sense of rank differential to facilitate the consensual approach. If this method of informed consent is followed, it will best protect those individuals taking pharmacological enhancements by ensuring a balance of proportionality, paternalism and fairness. It will also protect the prescribing military doctors from negligence and protect those in command by transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Richard, in the field of emerging military technologies, there is a broad range of enhancements being developed. Some are pharmaceutical, as you mentioned. Others may be surgical, such as laser surgery to enhance vision, or concern the genetic modification of a soldier's DNA. In your study, you limit yourself strictly to pharmaceutical enhancements of soldiers. One of the characteristics of pharmaceutical enhancements is, to date at least, that the enhancement as such does not amount to a weaponization. As long as you limit yourself in your study strictly to pharmaceutical enhancements, you can, thus, afford yourself the luxury of not having to consider the issue of the enhancement being a weaponization as such. However, it seems that pharmaceutical enhancements cannot always be seen in complete isolation vis-à-vis other forms of enhancement. For instance, When by means of a surgical implant of a computer chip, a human weapon interface is created, then one can safely argue that the enhancement concerned amounts as such to a key element of a weaponization. In turn, this weaponization might bring into play Article 36 of Additional Protocol 1 concerning new weapons. Although I am not a medical expert myself, I assume that a soldier receiving the implant mentioned would have to receive a drug as well, in order to prevent the body immune system from rejecting the implant. If that would happen, is it then legitimate, in your view, to declare Article 36 applicable on pharmaceutical enhancements? If yes, what impact would that have on the practice of asking for informed consent, both during the period of military service and thereafter, when a veteran returns back to civilian society? When answering this question, I asked you to take account of the fact that pharmaceutical enhancements are likely to be of a temporary nature, in the sense that the effect of the drug given is likely to wear off over time. However, when a soldier would receive an implant, the enhancement would become semi-permanent, and the drug which suppresses the bodily immune system would have to be given for a longer period of duration, perhaps even to continue after the individual has left the service.
Philip, thank you for an interesting question. Enhancements could be broad-ranging, and as you've said, it could be surgery to enhance them, it could be the use of technology to integrate human with machine, or it could be the creation of a super soldier by modification of DNA. But do any of these create a weaponized soldier where Article 36 might apply? And the reality is that the potential cognitive pharmacological enhancements might do the same. Your point on whether immunosuppressive drugs are required to prevent a rejection of an implant can be simply answered as no. If you look at either implanted joints or internal pacemakers and internal defibrillators, they're made of components which do not trigger an immune response and therefore do not require long-term immunosuppressive therapy. Now, Article 36 of Additional Protocol 1 is all about new weapons, and it states that new weapons must not be excessively injurious, they must not have indiscriminate effects, and if used, they must be used in a proportionate way. And so the aspects to consider with enhancements are the soldiers' weapons already? Probably yes, because they are the means or method of warfare. They are the ones that go into combat. They are the ones that pull the trigger. And therefore, are they a new weapon or just really an upgrade if enhanced? Could a super soldier be capable of distinction and avoid superfluous or unnecessary suffering? Could they be classed as a biological agent under the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention? Traditionally, this applies to microbes, but there is no clarity as to what a biological agent actually is. So to take some examples to see whether enhancements would be classed as a new weapon, let's look at laser eye surgery. This creates better vision and perhaps a more capable sniper. This is probably just an upgrade to a soldier. What about a super aggressive combat soldier? Can they distinguish civilians from the enemy? Potentially this might be classed as a new weapon. What about having an internal biomechanical aid to cause more injury, the cybernetic organism? This would probably be classed as a new weapon. DNA modification to just reduce those basic needs like food, water, or to reduce fatigue. I would say this would be an upgrade and not a new weapon. And lastly, what about adding some sort of chip to enhance thought processes, like a Google Translate chip? This might make faster decision making, but really I would consider that just as an upgrade and not a new weapon. So Article 36 states that if it's a new weapon, then there is a requirement for a thorough review and assessment, and including the legal considerations. And it's important to establish if the enhancements are reversible or if they could be removed at the end of military service. Now, pharmacological enhancing drugs might wear off, but DNA modification would likely be permanent. And if it is permanent, does it confer an unfair advantage to that individual in society or even pose a danger to society? And this is applicable not just at the end of military service, but what about during leave periods whilst in service? Therefore, the informed consent process would have to be amended in this case. I think you would have to inform about the risk of uncertainty, particularly as the long-term effects may never be known. You'd have to inform the individual that there may be compulsory reversal surgery on leaving the service to remove the enhancement. They should be warned that if captured by the enemy, they might have their organs harvested so that the enemy can understand the new technology. The enhancements might affect their family, their relationships and friendships. They would need to know this. And if their DNA was modified, it really might affect their ability to have children, or they might be passing the enhancement on to children. And lastly, they'd need to be informed that it might become illegal for them to compete or gain qualifications due to the unfair advantage that they might have gained. Outside of whatever this informed consent process might become, civil-military relationships would have to capture it in a public debate and really get society to agree that enhancements are acceptable.
As we come to the end of this year's prize ceremony, I want to congratulate our winners, Richard and Kevin, to thank my colleagues, Jana and Stefan, and of course, everyone who has taken the time to watch this recorded ceremony as part of the EuroISME conference, or who will watch it via the internet at a later time. Everyone would have loved the opportunity to have been able to meet together, and I'm sure that you would have loved the opportunity to have spoken personally to our two winners. But the global pandemic has made this impossible for this year. But like you, I hope that we will be able to meet in person next year and to enjoy the opportunity to meet with friends and colleagues in person and to engage in a wide array of conversations about military ethics. I would also like to thank Mrs. Ivana Gosick, the Secretary of the Prize Jury, for all of her amazing support and assistance. We genuinely value and appreciate her dedication and professionalism. I also want to thank everyone involved in the production of this video. May I take this opportunity to encourage everyone watching this video at the end of this ceremony to spread the news that we are currently taking applications for the 2022 EuroISME Prize. You can find details of how to apply or encourage students or friends to apply who are eligible on the EuroISME website under the Thesis Prize tab. I know that I and my fellow jury members would be delighted if we had a very large number of applications for the 2022 prize. You know, it is a delight to read the exceptionally high-quality thesis that we receive every year, and my desire is to see the prize continue to grow year by year. Thank you for your continued support, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference and that I see you next year when hopefully we get the opportunity to meet together in person.